Welcome, friends! Currently walking the streets of New York, but once I get home, I'm going to answer this question of why Ivy. Over the years, I asked people for their honest response to this question, and unfortunately, a lot of the responses that I get are not very good. So today I'll be sharing what I think, in my humble opinion, is a better answer, as well as my own personal story. I hope you guys find it helpful. So without further ado, guys, enjoy. First thing that I want you guys to do, take out a sheet of paper, pen, pencil, notes app, whatever it is you use to write things down on, and just jot down the first 2 to 3 words that come up when you see this question. Why do you personally want to attend an Ivy League school? In a few seconds, we'll compare answers between the one that you wrote down and the few answers that I'm going to show you. Okay, I take it you've written down your answer. Let's continue. So the 3 most common answers that I get have to do with family, prestige/job opportunities, career opportunities, security, and the Ivy League has a superior education. Really, all 3 of these answers tie together. The first answer has to do with your family or legacy. And I would say there's really 2 sides to this story. To one extent, maybe you're a part of a family where your older brother or sister attended a very prestigious university. Maybe you have legacy to Harvard because your dad went there. Of course, there's gonna be an element of pressure in order to succeed. And I saw this a lot, honestly, when I was at boarding school at Exeter. There were a lot of kids who their parents had been to Exeter before, their parents had gone on to Ivy League institutions, and I watched them really struggle with this pressure. Personally, I don't have any family members who attended Yale, nothing like that. I was the first one in my family, so I belonged in this other camp down here, the other zone. I can't speak for other people's experiences, but I lived in a Chinese American household, and my parents wanted the best possible education for me. This best possible education translated to like the best top schools in America. According to those US News rankings, that would be your Harvard, your Yale, Princeton, Stanford, etc. However, this is kind of a dangerous perspective because it turns out that the reason you want to go to a great school is because your community, your family, your friends, your culture is pushing you to go to a really great school. But whether or not that desire is truly coming from within, right? An intrinsic desire, I think you guys have to really take a moment to reflect and ask yourself that question. Do I want to go because other people want me to go? Or is the reason I want to go have to do more with me as a human being? I think this is a good segue to the next point because family and education are kind of tied with one another. My parents were Chinese immigrants and they didn't know too much about the American education system. Of course, they knew that Harvard was a fantastic school, Yale was a fantastic school, and the reason they must be fantastic schools is because they have a much better education than, let's say, your typical state school. But is that a fair assumption? I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I think that this point is, frankly, absolutely hilarious because literally all of MIT's courses are available online for free at this website called like MIT Open Courseware. Yes, some of the materials a little bit outdated. I think the lectures recorded in like 07, 08, 09, but oh my gosh, guys, they have hundreds of lectures pre-recorded for you online for free, complete with problem sets, exams, as well as answer keys. In other words, if you sat down and you worked through the curriculum, you could learn everything that an MIT undergrad learns when it comes to computer science, electrical engineering, biology. So what are we paying for, guys? What are we paying for? We are paying for a degree, a piece of paper. And I just think that this is so funny. I was very surprised when I learned that my buddy at UT Austin, computer science curriculum, pretty much identical to Yale's curriculum, to MIT's curriculum. We're all learning the same stuff, described in different ways. So is the education really that much better? I don't think so. You know what? I'm gonna go out and say that I learned more at Exeter. Exeter really teaches you how to think. They were all discussion-based classes, 12 people in a classroom, nowhere to hide. If you didn't do your homework, everyone knew. Your peers knew, your teacher knew, you just stayed silent during the class. At Yale, it's so much easier not to do the homework in these big lecture halls. I just remember being so turned off. I went from discussing text, digging deep, thinking critically every single day at Exeter in 5 or 6 different subjects to melting in a lecture hall with 200 or 300 other students. There was no engagement whatsoever. Perhaps During my third and fourth year, I could have taken more advantage of the smaller seminars and worked more closely with professors. At that time, I was so jaded. It had been 2 years of me sitting around in a classroom, and I really think I could have learned more at a library, e-learning. YouTube honestly has done more for me when it comes to personal finance and learning how to be charismatic and starting businesses and that sort of thing. I really cannot say firmly that I believe that Yale's quality of education is 3, 4, 5, 6 times better than University of Florida. If you compare the tuition rates, you would have to argue that, wow, Yale costs 60, 70 grand a year. And if I went to the University of Florida, it might have cost me like 10 or 20K. I mean, I was on full financial aid, so it was free, but I'm just pretending if I were a middle-class American. So in order to justify that cost difference, Yale must be 4 or 5 times better in terms of the quality of education. I just don't think that's the case. And that is my honest opinion. At this point in time in the video, if you guys could toss me a like, that would be super duper helpful. Please subscribe. My goal is to try to get 100 subscribers by the end of the month. It's a bit of a stretch right now, but I think with a little push, we could get it done. Finally, the third most common answer has to do with prestige. Yale and Harvard are definitely some of the most prestigious, well-known universities, not just in America, but in the world. And I'll come back to this point. How much is this prestige really worth? Well, to one extent, I guess it ties back to family and legacy. If you get into Yale or Harvard, that actually improves your son or daughter's chances of getting into the same school, maybe even your granddaughter or grandson's chances. So it's not just a decision that affects you, but it literally will affect your family and your relatives for the next several decades. That's something to think about. The other thing is that I think, especially when I was growing up hearing from my parents, like they wanted me to go to the best possible school in order to have more job security and more career opportunities. In their mind, going to such a great school means that it should be super duper easy to find a stable job with a high paying salary. And that is in many ways like the Chinese dream, right? There's a phrase called like 铁饭碗, which means like the iron bowl. Having that secure career, being able to support yourself, being able to support your family, that is highly desirable. And since my parents also came from the Cultural Revolution where there was a lot of insecurity, I can totally see why this was so appealing to them in particular. What I've discovered though is that there's a lot more nuance. I haven't really shared this with a lot of people, but during my senior year, I applied to 50 to 60 different jobs in finance and consulting, as well as marketing, business, operations, and I didn't get a single offer, aside from my buddy's startup. Shout out Victor, thank you so much for hiring me. What I discovered far too late is that these top finance institutions where I wanted to go to make a lot of money to support my family, they don't really care about what school you graduated from. Sometimes they care about the school you graduated from, and I'll get to that in a second. But for the most part, the number one thing they're looking for is past work experience. Have you worked in a hedge fund before? Have you interned? That's the kind of stuff that they really care most about. Because the thing is, like, a degree at Yale in economics or psychology is not necessarily going to prepare you for a career in finance. The best thing to do is land that coveted internship your sophomore, junior year. That is the number one thing that will improve your job outlook going into your senior year. The other thing to note is that a third of Harvard and Yale grads end up going into finance and consulting. So if that's what you desire and that's really what you're gunning for in life, then definitely your odds of becoming a great consultant is highest if you go to an Ivy League university. Yes, I almost forgot to mention, when it comes to prestige, a lot of people are also thinking about income. If you go to an Ivy League school, you'll make more money. This is from the Washington Post, and it claims that Ivy League graduates make more money than people who graduate from any other college. There's also this Investopedia article, which does this fancy DCF, discounted cash flow analysis, and arrives at the totally opposite conclusion. The Ivy Leagues are not worth it from a dollar cost perspective. So who's right? And the answer is, guys, like, these findings are so wildly variable that they're essentially inconclusive. I don't think that you can actually glean some meaningful information from this. Like, I know people who graduated from Yale working in the nonprofit sector and are making 40K a year in Manhattan. And I also know people who graduated from Yale and are working in AI research at Facebook and are going to make $200,000, or people who work at hedge funds and make $250,000. Now, the number of people who do that is actually low. So Yale has 6,000 students, graduating class is 1,500-ish. I would say that maybe 150, top 10% make that much. But even those really common jobs, like in finance and consulting, Your typical investment banker makes 80, 90K your first year. At the same time, they're working 80 hours a week, working their butts off. Consultants too work really crazy hours. And so on an hourly basis, they're not making that much more. Of course, the growth potential for working in a career like finance and consulting is much better. So in 5 or 10 years, you could be making much, much more. Your entry-level job, you won't be making or staying at that same salary for a long time. You hear me talking a lot about finance and consulting, and that's because it doesn't seem like a really common thing now when you're young. And as soon as you get to college, it starts to grow like a little, I don't want to say tumor, but like this little animal on your shoulder kind of just grows over you. And I think that if you talk to any Ivy League student, there must have been some point in time that they really actually considered like finance and consulting and quote unquote selling out and becoming like a snake. And there is something really appealing about that. I think who doesn't want to make a lot of money? Who doesn't want to have a stable job, super duper respected in society, working at something like a McKinsey, Bain? It's very prestigious. Like people go to the Ivy League, and then after they graduate, they're looking for something that has equal prestige. The number of students who graduated from Yale and actually started their own business, guys, was like 0.01%. It is so uncommon and so rare. Harvard, MIT, Stanford have a much stronger culture of entrepreneurship. We've covered the 3 not so good answers. What's the better answer? And this, I really had to go to Yale to even understand this and really internalize it. The correct answer, perhaps, for attending one of these elite, prestigious universities is because the people you meet are so A1, high quality, top tier people. I met kids at Yale, which I knew might be a future president, Nobel Prize winning scientist. This is kind of funny because like in my previous video, I talked about developing an edge, but you'll find that no one at these top schools are ants, right? They're insects. They don't just do one thing and do it well. Everyone is what I call a dash. So you'll be a ballerina dash chemist dash cook. My favorite part about Yale was the beginning and the end. In the beginning, I met these wonderful new roommates. We did something called hometowns, and this is a tradition in, what are they called? Oh my gosh, why am I blanking? Yes, pre-orientation camps. People sit down in small groups, 4 to 6. In my case, I didn't go to a pre-orientation camp, so I did it just with my suite, and everyone shared their life story for about 2 to 3 hours. There was a much more intense experience during my senior year where I was part of a secret society. It's called Spade and Grave, and this is a bio society, which is short for autobiography. So everyone went around throughout the year, and there were 16 people in the society, 8 boys, 8 girls. Everyone shared their entire life story. We had a slideshow, TV, and people just talked. And everyone else sat and listened and asked questions. And that was probably the best part of my Yale experience, was getting to know these other students, where they came from, their hardships, their aspirations. And when I think about if I had gone to University of Florida or if I had gone to Georgetown, I don't think that I would have had this experience. For one, a lot of the Ivy League universities are quite small. You'll never get that scale of like 30,000 kids at like UC Berkeley or something like that. My friend at Berkeley had more kids in his dorm than there were at Yale. So that was definitely an eye-opening statistic. And because of the smaller size and I guess the type of people who apply to Yale, who are accepted into Yale, you're more likely to meet these really just super inspirational, stellar, high quality people. And I don't just mean high quality in terms of academics or the leadership activities they do, but also some really genuinely nice and kind people. Not everyone at Yale is nice and kind, but all my friends are. So I'm just really lucky and thankful that I met them. So this is it. At some point in time, the college admissions office might ask you, why do you want to attend Yale? Why do you want to attend XYZ school? This is a very solid answer to start off on. It's kind of like the foundation, but definitely spin it and make it more unique on your own. Another really great question for you guys to consider in any kind of application, whether you're applying to college or a summer program or grad school, is this question of what do you bring to the community? The community is going to teach you a lot and help you grow, but how are you going to help the community grow? That is a very, very good question to enter any kind of application with, right? Talk about like what kind of role you fulfill. All right, now we've gotten to the really juicy part, which was my personal reason of why I so badly wanted to attend an Ivy League school. So when I went to Exeter, I found out that the odds of getting into a top college are 30%. Essentially, 1 out of 3 people who graduated from Exeter ended up going to these elite top colleges, Williams, MIT, Duke, Ivies, of course. It's actually absurd, the admissions rate from Yale. So I did some research, and it's like 12 kids from my year in 2016 went to Yale. I think they accepted 15 or 16. That is more than some entire states. My friend from Indiana said they took less than 10 kids her year, and they take less than 10 kids from Japan, like the country of Japan. After learning this information, I was like, word, this is gonna be super easy. All I have to do is be in the top third of my class at Exeter, and we are chilling. This was actually a lot harder than I thought. I went to Exeter and I did not graduate in the top third of my class. My academics were not really up there. And I think for like a Chinese male, I was really worried, because all my life I've been told you need really great grades, and here I was, I didn't have great grades. Somehow I slipped through the cracks and ended up at Yale. And I would say that the hardest part, guys, was my junior year. Junior year was absolutely bone crushing for me at Exeter. I think I slept 5 hours a day. I was averaging 3 or 4 cups of coffee. I lost so much height. I think if I actually slept, I could have just been like 3 or 4 inches taller. So I sacrificed those 3 or 4 inches for Yale. And I lived in this dorm, silly. And a lot of the guys wanted to go to Ivy League schools. And fortunately, many of them did end up going to their dream colleges. So well done, team. But I remember there being nights that were just so tough. I think Exeter really hit us hard with a lot of major assignments. You got these 5 tests every semester. We have 3 semesters a year. You have 5 different subjects. You have to write 3 papers for your humanities classes. And so it just constantly felt like a stream of very intense assignments, week after week, day after day. I remember a junior sitting me down and just telling me, Kevin, like, success at Exeter, your junior year looks like getting into bed each night, finishing everything that you're supposed to do. I was like, that's ridiculous. I remember hearing that when I was in 9th grade. At any rate, the going got really tough, and I really wanted to get into an Ivy League school, and the reason is because I had worked in my parents' Chinese restaurant for a summer, and I had grown up hanging around the restaurant, and I'd seen just how hard my father works, and my mother. My mom is a waitress. My dad was a cook. Actually, my dad did everything. He was the cook, he was the manager, he was the plumber, he was the delivery man. Everything that needed to be done, he took care of. And so there was this one summer where I was supposed to go to like a summer camp that I had been accepted into, and my dad hurt his wrist. And so he called me, and this was after a very intense semester at Exeter. I came home, and essentially I worked in this restaurant for 2 months. Every single day, we woke up at 9 or 10 a.m., went to the restaurant. I stood there and cooked and worked for 12 hours, 7 days a week. And that was absolutely the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. And I really thought about that experience when I was back at Exeter and I was studying for my exams. It would be like 2 or 3 a.m. and I would be trying to memorize concepts like nephrons in the kidney and work on like fiction at 2 a.m. delirious. You know, my buddies are in the same room as me. I saw a lot of those guys call it quits. You know, it's so late in the night, you just close the book, you say, whatever, if I get a B, I'll get a B. And I would always routinely be like one of the last people up. The reason is because I thought back to my dad. I was like, at 2 a.m., here I am at Exeter, and my dad is probably in Miami at the restaurant, in the kitchen, squatting down, just kneading rice and trying to prepare the fried rice for the next day. When I thought about that image of my parents working so hard, so I had a shot at attending a great school, it made me feel really guilty if I wasn't trying my hardest. Getting into Yale justified 20 plus years my parents spent working in a Chinese restaurant. It really wasn't about me. It's not like I wanted to go to a great school so I could make more money, so I could help my future generations. Like, yes, those were nice to haves, but the core reason was I wanted to make sure that those years my parents spent in the restaurant were not going to waste. I really wanted to make them proud. It just ties back to that initial answer of family, and there was that pressure. It's one of those strange, humorous things, because my mom was like, I don't think you can get into Yale. At the same time, I hope you get into like a school like Princeton or Yale. She actually didn't want me to go to Yale. She wanted me to go to Princeton. She thought it would be like more higher quality education. Sorry, Mom. You'll have to settle for Yale. I mean, my mom took out tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt when I was in middle school, so I could continue going to piano lessons and tennis lessons and swim practices and campouts with my Boy Scout troop. I didn't know that until many, many years down the road. She always believed that no matter our circumstance, even if we're lower middle class, even if the economy is collapsing, you deserve the same opportunities that any other American child should have. And so I'm really grateful to both of my parents for the enormous sacrifices they made. And I just didn't want those sacrifices to go to waste. I guess that's why. The message that I want to leave with you guys today is know your why. Why do you want to go to college? Why do you want to go to an Ivy League school? Why get educated in the first place? What does this mean to you? It's not just about the next step, but it's about the emotions that come behind these opportunities. There's another very inspirational essay that I read by this dude, Jonathan. It's in this New York Times article written in 2017, but I highly recommend you guys check it out. To end, I would like to dedicate this video to my mother and my father, who emigrated from China in the 80s. They came to New York, then they moved down to Miami because New York is really cold, and they're Cantonese, they're from Guangzhou, so they found somewhere a little bit closer to home in terms of the climate. And there they opened up shop. They started a Chinese restaurant. I mean, many of you guys know this, but I went to Exeter on full financial aid. I went to Yale on full financial aid. And my parents worked really, really hard so I'd have a shot at attending some of these institutions. So thank you so much, Mom. Thank you so much, Dad. You guys mean everything to me.